And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I'm talking with an amazing gentleman today, Dr. Bertrand Babinet, who is an amazing human being, holds many, many degrees, and is focused on sort of spiritual counseling and spiritual psychology, but you actually apply it to functional medicine and some very practical medical modalities, don't you?
Well, what happened is that I was working mostly in the field of spiritual psychology, and then my late wife developed cancer in the late 90s.
Okay.
And so at that time, I started transforming my work, using the same methodology of muscle testing, kinesiology, but within the field of biology and within the field of understanding better what health is at the physical level and how to address that. Right. So I have a kind of two hats. On one hand, I work very much in the psycho-spiritual field, and on the other hand, I work primarily in the field of functional medicine, which is basically seeing how the body is designed to work and how we can restore that level of health. And I have an ebook. So I have a book out, which is very much on the psycho-spiritual part.
Right, we'll talk about that later in the show.
And then I have an ebook on my website, which is very much about the functional part of my work. So I've those two hats.
Right. And you're also a licensed acupuncturist.
I am. Yeah.
How long have you been practicing acupuncture?
Since 1987.
Oh, wow. Wow. Acupuncturists have a very special place in our hearts here at Talking Alternative because the founder of the station is a gentleman by the name of Giorgio Rapetti, who has since become a Buddhist monk, but he was an acupuncturist. And he wrote a book about it called Wands 3E acupuncture, where acupuncturists are always very welcome in this space. Okay, so, how do you, maybe you should talk a little bit just about, what is your neural organizational technique, or the NOT, and then the other one, I'm just going to use the abbreviation, NAET. How do those things work on a sort of practical, physical level, even though they're sort of more, I'm assuming, based on the energetics of the body?
Well, so there are a lot of different things. So NAT was developed by an Indian woman who had allergies all her life, and who basically came to the United States, became a chiropractor, and then started integrating chiropractic and acupuncture, Chinese medicine, in the treatment of allergies, and finding out that, in fact, allergies were just an ineffective pattern of response to things which normally would not disturb us, which is not that different from what issues are in our life. It's very similar, except one is a physiological response and the other one is a psychological response. An issue is usually not because the situation is impossible to manage, is because we don't really know how to manage it. Well, allergies is a little bit the same way. It's not because the body is not capable of answering and adapting to a challenge, is because it's triggering an over response, an abnormal, an aggressive pattern of response, rather than a modulated, gentle pattern of response. So it's very similar. So that's our work. NOT is very different. It was a chiropractor who was in Brooklyn, actually, who developed the method. It's called neural organization technique, but he taught that a lot all over the place. And it was a very advanced form of chiropractic, which really, again, restored the neurological system rather than keep on adjusting people. So his belief is that if you could restore the neurological pathways, then the body would hold adjustment instead of having to constantly repeat.
I see.
In a lot of ways, a big part of it is the craniosacral approach.
I see.
But it has a lot of other components, but it's a big part of that.
So not like network chiropractic, which I think is much more energetic,
is similar.
Right? Oh, it is similar.
But it's a different approach. Network goes along, touch certain points which are neurologically, emotionally active as a way of restoring balance. And then you have something which is called an ET, which is neuro-emotional technique.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have a lot
of many techniques.
That's right.
It's really, that's the one things that I see kind of flourishing just over the last 10, 15 years that I've been involved in this industry, is that there's so many new modalities and techniques and so many different ways to help people these days. It's really amazing to see how things have sprouted in such a fast way.
Absolutely.
So your practice is sort of, I guess, half sort of psychological and half kind of functional.
Or both.
Or both.
Because usually I end up working with my client on both ends.
And where are you based out of? Because I know you're visiting here in New York, right?
Yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
In Boulder, Colorado. It's an interesting place to be.
Yes.
So, like, what kinds of conditions are people like coming to you normally that they want support or help with?
Pretty much everything.
Everything.
Okay. It's people coming, calling me because they have a cold. People who call me because they have cancer, or there are people who call me because they don't feel good, and I have people. So it's quite a huge range. It's very broad, and it totally depends. They also call me about their cats or their dogs or their horses. So
in Colorado, horses is a big thing. Yes.
And their space. They will also say, I have weird energy in my basement. What can I do about it?
Okay.
So it's very broad. I have people.
So with the people who, let's say, have a little bit more severe conditions, because those always tend to be kind of the more interesting things to talk about. Someone comes into your office, maybe they found out they had cancer, or they just had a stroke or a heart attack or something. How do you start to work with them? Like, how do you assess or kind of know, like, how you should start to work with them? I
always start with a premise that health is simple.
Okay,
which is, so basically the foundation of health is always the same for every living system. We absorb, we transform, we eliminate, and we protect. That's true psychologically, that's true physiologically. And so whoever comes to see me, the first level of assessment that we're going to look is, how effectively are you absorbing your food? How effectively are you metabolizing, transforming the element you are taking in? How effectively are you removing toxin? And how effectively are you maintaining the homeostasis and the ability of the body to take care of itself? So that's always going to be my first foundation. Then, of course, if I'm dealing with more serious condition, I don't necessarily believe that I have all the answers. I basically I have a lot of answers, but I don't have all the answers. And I also think it's very important to give people the freedom to choose how they are going to respond. So I don't impose a model of what they should do. So with some people, it's very much a complementary approach, and saying, okay, I understand you are doing that medically. Now let's see what else we need to do
to support
psycho-spiritually or nutritionally to really and decrease the side effect and increase the effectiveness of the treatment.
Do you have maybe an example or a case study of a client who had some severe condition that you were able to help them to move past it in an unusual way?
Well, yes, I probably have many of them. I'm working.
Just one.
Well, I'm working now with a person who has, prostate cancer.
Okay.
And the condition was pretty acute and with metastases and things like that.
Okay.
And he did some of the medical treatment, but basically what I'm doing with him is saying, okay, now how do we restore the integrity of the terrain now that you have gone through the radiation and the chemotherapy?
Right.
How do we restore the integrity of your body so that you're not going to recreate it?
Right.
And what was going on psychologically that could have been part of creating that disease, and how do we change that? Okay. So again, not looking necessarily, you were mentioning something interesting. You said sometimes a difficulty is a signpost towards health.
Oh, right.
And so very often, when I will look at people, I look at, well, what is it that this disease is
trying to tell you?
Is trying to tell you, and how are you going to learn from it as an experience?
Right.
So when we were going with my wife, basically died after 15 years of cancer. She had a recurrence.
Wow.
She was completely free for 10 years, and then it kicked back in. But all throughout, we called it our cancer adventure. We never called it, this is mean, this is bad, this is terrible. It was, this is a process of learning, and let's learn as much as we can in the process of learning. Okay, so she had her learning. My learning was to learn about functional medicine. Her learning was, what's in it for me, and how do I move towards my transition in a joyful way, in a way which was not, this is terrible, woe is me, why is that happening to me, or any of that.
Right. Not being a victim.
Not at all.
But understanding that we're co-creators and why is this happening this way?
And that death is a natural part of life.
Absolutely.
It's not something terrible or horrible. It just... It's the next step,
Yes.
So.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. I want to talk about your book, Empowering the Heart. It came out just recently, correct?
It came out a year ago, and we're actually reissuing it. We canceled with our editor because our publisher, because we didn't like them.
Oh, okay.
And then we are republishing, and relaunching the book in the fall.
Okay, wonderful. All right, great. So everybody, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're talking this hour with Dr. Bertrand Babinet, and we will be right back after these messages.